Hello, my name is Dan Johnson and welcome back to the Who podcast. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. Doctor Who fans will recognise his signature haircut from YouTube and his voice from Big Finish's Ninth Doctor Adventures. It's Adam Martyn. How are you doing today, Adam?
Hey, hiya Dan. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I always feel bad when I come on podcasts when I'm on the video we're on. You can tell I'm having a bad hair day because I'm wearing a hat. But whenever anyone says, "Oh yes, you'll know him from his hair," I always feel like a fraud because I've got my hat on. But
When I wrote that about this morning, I thought, oh, that's really clever, that. But no one's ever mentioned that to him before.
No, I'm happy for it to be mentioned. I always just think, like, I did try. I want to put that out there. I was, to be honest, my hair at the minute, it always gets to this stage. I'll be brief on this. I'm already tangenting and we've only just got started.
Completely
My
all right.
hair grows, that's fine. My hair grows very quickly. And with my hairstyle, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's basically all just spiked, like straight up as high as it can go. But there's a certain point where I think it's a bit too much for itself and it just sort of begins to, it's like when you're demolishing a building, like parts of it collapse and then it all collapses. So,
Is it a bit like a
I didn't want to
Mohican?
treat your viewers to that.
You know, like
Uh,
sort of, like when it's up and they've got to keep it up all the time, and it's quite difficult to maintain it. It's because I don't know how, in
yeah.
reality, how tall is the hair? That's the
Oh, it's
question.
like I always joke. I don't know if this is an accurate number, but I always joke that I am 5'10",
Okay, yeah,
but when my hair is all spiked up, I'm 6 foot.
no,
So
yeah. I say
again,
very much the similar idea.
yeah, but no, it is quite tall. I think I've managed to perfect it because honestly, when I first started doing it about how long would it have been now? Maybe 12, 13 years ago.
I can
It very
verify
much,
that
yeah,
after
exactly. It was
going through a lot of some of your YouTube videos from the past.
That's yeah, yeah. It took a lot of time to perfect, but I think that's I moved a long way from being a boy using the wet look, too much wet look hair gel at
Yes,
the school
I've been
disco.
there as well.
Yeah, I think most boys of our
Sturdiness.
generation have been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what we were thinking because you look back and you think your hair is literally like shining, like it's
Yeah,
shining because it's so wet and it just
it's
just awful.
you. When I look back at it, I think like the wind wouldn't move it. Like the
Yeah,
wind couldn't move it. The like if you put your hand on it, it would bounce as one item rather than
yes,
like strands. It's strange sort of thing that I just had all the way up to my GCSEs till I was
yeah.
16. I had that sort of like year 7 to year 11. I was like that, and then in sixth form I went to clay, and it was a lot easier. Now you can actually run my hands through it, but I probably will run my
Yes.
hand through it many times today during this podcast because of the fascination with your hair.
Oh no, bless you. You go for it. You go for
You
it.
become self-conscious of your own hair, and you think, "Oh, it's out of place,"
No,
because it's been
I'm like that
mentioned
all
to
the
you.
time.
But yes, so Adam, how would you introduce yourself if you'd like to explain yourself to who
Oh,
you are, if they don't know who you are?
well, I'd say well, I say I'm an actor, but I mean that these days that encompasses so many things. Like I'm an actor, I'm a singer, I write, I produce my own content, as you've mentioned, for YouTube. I'm just a bit of everything in the performing arts. I'm just a bit of everything really, because even though acting is like my main craft, that's what I trained in. I went to drama school to study it, and that's what I mainly do. But one thing we were told from the very moment we walked in was, your course is acting, like that's what you're going to major in. But they're like, we advise that you pick up as much as you can in the performing arts because I've been asked constantly since I graduated to, oh, can you just do, a bit of like the tech side of it? Can you operate this? Or can you just direct this little bit? Or can you write this little? Do you know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
often called upon to do things that you originally didn't get into the business for. But I think that it's good to
Hmm.
be open to that, to embrace it. So, yeah, just a bit of everything. I mean, I recently did just my local community. A bunch of kids were doing their acting show over the weekend and I was asked to do like the help with the tech side of it, basically be the stage manager. And I'd
Yeah.
never stage managed before until this. But you learn as you go. You just have to throw yourself into it and trust your own instincts. And in the end, it went well. But yeah, I just sort of like to do a bit of everything, really, performing arts wise.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but I think I've heard something before about how within that sort of industry that you're in, you have to be everything to everyone, and not just in terms of acting, of being versatile in that sense, but if you're called upon, like you said, if you're called upon, you need to try and do everything, because I think a lot of it is because of a sort of crowded market, and if you can one up yourself with like saying that you can do stagehand stuff, then that's going to help your career prospects, for example.
Absolutely. If anyone listening wants to get into whether it's acting or anything in the performing arts, the more skills to your bow, as it were, that you have in that field, the more, just put it blunt, the more employable you'll be. That's the blunt answer of it, because I see so many acting jobs now that they say, here's the part, but they also saying, we'd also prefer it if you can, and then, insert thing here, play an instrument or an accomplished dancer or has technical knowledge, anything. So yeah, the more skills you can pick up, then just throw yourself into it, give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, I've bring it to Big Finish briefly. I've heard when they talk about behind the scenes stuff. I think is it Helen Goldwyn did like tap dancing on the recent Sixth Doctor adventures, because they're an accomplished tap dancer, and I was like, oh right, absolutely. You don't expect that to come from a producer director.
I've got so much respect for Helen because. Obviously, I had the privilege of working with her when I went to do my Big Finishes. But I mean, just when I got a chance to interview her a few years ago, and just hearing, like you're saying, the breadth of what she's done in her career already. She's an actor, singer, tap dancer, and she's got all these things she could list, at once. Yeah. Like I do every single thing here. So it's hard to pigeonhole, really. Like when people say, "Oh, so you act then?" I'm like, "Well, yes, I do, but I also." You feel like you want to showcase yourself. You don't just want to say, oh, I only act. You want to be like, yeah, but I also do this, this, and this. But yeah, I've got a lot of respect for Helen and a lot of the Big Finish staff, actually. A lot of the writers, but in particular, like you say, from listening to the behind the scenes, they say that they're either were or are actors or performers in some respect.
Yeah, because at one stage, I questioned whether I could do this sort of stuff full time, and I sort of went into that idea, and I have to admire you and respect you for the almost the will to keep going and pursuing that, because for me, I felt like I was just hoping for a dream, I suppose, reaching out and trying to get something, and even though I never really thought that it would be a reality to me, so it wasn't a massive dream to be an actor or anything like that, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, oh, let's see if I can do that. But I ended up asking into Big Finish about sort of how their job positions work and things like that, what you need in order to do it. And found out a lot of them are freelance jobs.
Yes, yeah.
So that means that, although it probably means that they work in other aspects of the industry, a lot of people end up working sort of side jobs, retail, hospitality, etc., in order to do their passions, and that I respect, because those kind of jobs are awful. I'm very thankful now that I'm in an industry and doing a job that I do enjoy doing. So
it is tough. Like the will, like you say, the will does waver sometimes on the lowest days. That I think most actors would say we all have days where we just sort of sat there thinking, what's the point in it, or why am I doing all this? But I think what pulls you through and sets aside, some people, is that what pulls me through, at least, is because I love doing it. I think it's that passion for it. So even when, say, on my toughest day, I've had, I don't know, as an example, like I've had several rejections from auditions, nothing's happening at the minute, and it does bum you out. I'm not going to pretend that I just like, oh, that's fine. You feel it. It's never nice to hear no, but I think you've got to be prepared for it. You can't be. I've met some children who tell me, oh, I want to be an actor and I want to do all this and I'm gonna do that. And it's hard because I think when you're young, obviously you want to support them in what they want to do. You want them to chase that dream or whatever it is, especially if they're passionate about it. But then you think, how at the same time do I let them know how truly difficult it is? And how much of it, honestly, I've learned, it's just down to luck. Like, you could be the most talented actor in the world, and you might not be right for that job. I remember being in an audition for. It was for. Do you remember the show Bad Education with Jack Whitehall?
I do, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was 2012 when that
Are you talking
started.
about the sort of original run? I don't remember the original
Oh,
run
of course,
because I was
yes,
too
there's
young. I could not watch it.
No, that's fair enough.
But
Yes, the original
I've
run.
seen it since. Yes.
Yeah. I was put up for an audition for, what was his name? Was it Joe, the lad who they cast was like in the a bigger lad? Was it like the one that Jack Whitehall's character like confided in?
Yes, as in sort of the nerdy,
Yeah,
geeky kind of.
yeah.
You know, he had a bowl cut during series 2.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, they had the
I think
bowl
it is
cut.
Joe,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I went up for that, and I
Did
remember
you?
going down to London. Yeah, I remember going down to London, and I was, how old was I then? I was like 16, I think. And you know, they give you a bit of the script, and you do the script, and Jack Whitehall wasn't there. It was like in front of a casting director. So you just read the script. And what's off-putting is a lot of casting things like that, they don't put anything into what they're reading, which they don't have to. That's not their job.
Yeah.
But I think when you're not expecting it, it does throw you off, because they'll just read it like this, like whatever the line is, they'll read it like that, and you think, oh God, you know. And when you're that young, you sort of think on your feet.
Yeah.
And I wasn't bothered that I didn't get it, but I remember walking out, and every other lad that was there looked like similar. And I stood out like a sore thumb, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and from that point, I sort of thought, well, they're not going to give it to me, and that's what I mean about.
Imagine you in that part. You see, because I
Oh,
could.
that's very, very kind, and I mean,
Maybe
that's very kind.
I think that I feel like that role, maybe because it's just so ingrained into my mind that I cannot remember the actor's name, that it is his part, and that
Yes.
like that's the look of the character. That I can't imagine yourself playing it, so I'm quite surprised that you've mentioned that. I didn't know that at all. That's quite interesting. Though
No. I mean, the lad who did it absolutely. So I remember watching it and thought, oh yeah, he was absolutely the right choice. But that's what a lot of auditions can be. Some auditions are better, where you know you walk out and everyone has like a completely different look or style or whatever. But then sometimes the description you get will be vague. It'll be like, you know, young man in his early 20s, must be, for example, like white, blonde hair, you know. But then you go, and they might all be, apart from you, say, for example, they might all be, for example, the same sort of size or build. They might have the same haircut. Do you know what I mean? So there's times where you go out when you finish an audition and you look at everyone else who looks vaguely similar, and you think, right, well, if they all look like that, then there's no chance that they're going to go for me. Do you know what I mean? But that happens a lot. But I wouldn't let that discourage you. Even if that happens and you think, oh God, I stick out like a sore thumb, you still go in there, you give everything you've got, because you never know, you might change their mind.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, as it's look, you've got to try. If you try it, at least you've got a cool story by the end of it. You know, at least you can say, I tried to be that iconic role in Bad Education. I may not have got it, but I was there. You know, in the running at one stage. So
yeah,
I'm going to change my questions around slightly, and I'm going to go into the acting section. I'm going to ask you how you fell in love with acting in the first place, because you're talking about was that your first audition? You said you were about 16.
I'd say that was my first professional audition, in the sense that if I got the job, I would have received money for it.
Yes, yeah.
which when you're 16, you're like, oh my God, imagine. Yeah, I think that was my first professional audition. I'd done auditions for, like, you know, either like the school play, or I did like a Saturday drama group, you know, like audition for stuff there.
Yes,
so I had a vague concept of it. But what made me fall in love with acting, from what I can remember, and that people say, oh, this is so cliche because you're a Doctor Who fan, but it probably was. Doctor Who had a massive part in it, because when that came back, I was 9 years old, which I'd argue was almost like the perfect age for that, you know, for the show to come back at that time. And I remember, I've got to give thanks to my dad, really, because we were watching something else on the telly, and the famous trailer came up, you know, do you want to come with me and all that. And my dad went, oh, they're bringing Doctor Who, because of course he remembered it. So he said, they're bringing Doctor Who back. And he said, we should watch this. He says, you'll like this. And, you know, I was like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. But sure enough, I remember we sat down and we watched Rose, and that, honestly, that was it. I was like hooked on the show. And by the time series 1 ended, I I don't know if it like I don't think it ended and I was like, that's it, I'm gonna be an actor. But I think it ended and I was like, I'm interested in what like they're doing. Like I want to
Yeah.
know more about this. And I think Christopher Eccleston in particular, like obviously I'd seen movies before and watched TV as a kid, but I think him playing the Doctor really made me appreciate, wow, this guy can play he can make me believe he's like 900 years old, like he's an alien, but actually he's a bloke from from Salford.
Yeah.
But I think he was the first example. I was like, wow, like I could do something like that if I could make myself become completely different. I could be like a 900-year-old alien. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I always credit his performance as being one of the key inspirations for me, I think, being interested in acting. And then I'd say that the thing that I think sort of solidified it was that same year, Christmas 2005. Was that 2005? Yeah.
That first
We
series one, was 5.
That's right. Yeah, we were doing A Christmas Carol at school
Oh yeah.
as the school play. A very truncated, abridged 30-minute version of it because we were all only like 9.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know if it's different these days, but back then, everyone had to be in it. You couldn't dodge it, etc.
Yes, it was much the same when I was there, but it was you could audition if you wanted to do a speaking role, and then if you weren't, you were
Yes.
sort of just you were sitting around really, and you'd sing
Yeah,
essentially.
you were the ensemble, but yeah,
Yes.
you didn't.
I
Really,
remember
you
spending
didn't
one
really
year
do it.
as the choir because I didn't
Yes, the
audition,
choir.
and from that point I auditioned just so I had something to do throughout all of those hours.
Yes,
and I was
it
an
was
elf and everything. Yeah.
it was pretty much the same with us. And I thought, obviously, they were looking for parts, and they said, "Who wants to read for Scrooge?" And I mean, I'd known the Christmas Carol story. I'd seen a few versions of it, and I liked it. So I thought, well, I'll go for that. And my 9-year-old instinct was to basically shout every line because the read was
Yes.
like, where he's cranky, going like, "I hate Christmas, bar humbug." And I think I just screamed it because I think that's what I'd seen before. And they were so shocked because by that point I was sort of more confident, but I was still quite a quiet little lad. I wasn't very outspoken or anything like that. So I think the teachers were like, what the bloody hell's going on here? But they gave it to me. And so, when you're 9 and you've got, in big air quotes, the leading role, and you've got lines to learn and you want to get it right. And I just really enjoyed it. I love the character side of it, dressing up, all of that. And I think from there, with every school play, I remember, going forward to do it. And then that went into high school as well. And ironically, I played Scrooge again in year 10 in a musical version of. I couldn't believe it, because I auditioned and I didn't audition for Scrooge. I think they just gave you like a general thing to read.
Yeah, it was like
And
a
I said-
blanket. I never did the secondary school ones, but Will did, and it was always a blanket like thing, and then all the parts would. I remember the drama of who was getting like different parts and stuff like that.
Honestly,
I
high
say I remember, it was only
school
about 4 years
parts, high school drama parts are just awful. That process is awful, like you say, dishing it out. But I got it, and I thought, oh God, like I've got it. I'm doing it again, and it's so different because now it's a full script and it had songs in it, and I'd never sang before. Like literally, I'd never. I mean, sang. I sang at like school discos, in the shower, whatever. But singing in a show, I was like, wait, I've got to. I remember going to the music teacher when she cast me, and she went, "You can sing, can't you?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And she went, "Well, have you tried?" And I was like, "Not really." So she gave me a song, and it's really, I don't know how, but it came out all right. And she went, "Yeah, you'll be fine." And sure enough, it was fine. And I've sang ever since in shows, but I didn't know I could do that until being prompted to. Isn't that funny? Like, you sing in the shower and stuff, but obviously everyone sounds great in the shower because the acoustics are amazing. But like the idea of singing on a stage in front of people, that was like, that had never crossed my mind. But I was very lucky. Could you imagine if I got that part and I sounded awful? That would have been a scandal.
Yeah, like because you said about screaming lines. I distinctly remember Scream singing. Like louder was better, basically. I think,
Louder
when
was
you were a
better.
kid. Yeah,
which isn't really helpful for your voice either.
I doubt it. But it just meant that we got to spend the entire day just screaming at the top of our lungs these songs, and then I mean, I was saying to my sister the other day that we spent all that time on those rehearsals and stuff like that, and then we had these huge, extravagant performances in our mind, and we thought we were bringing on these amazing plays, and then, especially because I only did it in primary school, so we're talking like, and they used to do year 1 to year 6 right through, and I think even reception did them, so below that, and you're just sort of screaming, and the singing must have been awful, and the acting, they probably weren't good performances in that respect, but they felt to us lot so real, and they felt like we really accomplished something as a group, and that is always something that I really enjoy. And I think it's very important that we carry on that tradition, because I think that a lot of people like you have discovered your voice because of that.
Yeah.
And,
no, I definitely think it should be carried on for sure.
Yeah, I think that as time goes on, I think that more stuff is cut, including it's always the arts, like art, art, performing arts, that kind of stuff always gets cut for some reason, and then they double down on maths. But I'm getting political now. But they it always seems to go that way, and I just feel like those moments are so precious to me, and they're precious, but I also hate them. Like, I really loathe these performances, and I'd never watched them.
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy for sure, but I do think the positives outweigh the negatives for most people who get involved in some way, or other.
Because it's very common that a lot of people that go into the industry use Doctor Who as sort of like a platform and say that they credit it to Doctor Who. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's any particular reason behind it? Or do you think that it's just by coincidence that a lot of very creative people are drawn to Doctor Who? Because in my mind, I think it's because it can change so much, and that's what I love about it, is that every episode I write is different to the last one.
Yeah, I think Doctor Who has that magic where, like you say, it changes so often, and it appeals to different people at different times, in different people's lives. And, there are some people who are fans of like all the eras. There are some people who say, I got exposed to it at this particular time, but then when it changed, it wasn't for me anymore. Not in any horrible or nasty way. They just like lost their connection. Yeah. Like I remember with me, obviously I got into it with Christopher Eccleston and then David Tennant, and again that period where between like 9 and 13, I think the show at that time, for that demographic, that was like the best introduction in the world. Like old enough to understand what was going on, still young enough to embrace the adventure side of it and not look for all the little holes here and there. And for me, that's always it's not even like my favorite era, but it's my favorite memory of watching Doctor Who, because it was all just so exciting and like the sense of adventure and all that. And in terms of people's citing people's inspiration, I think, because it is so creative. Like you're presented with these, really unique scenarios, worlds, characters, like the Doctor themselves and the TARDIS and all that. And I think it sparks the imagination in so many different kinds of people, whether that's to go into like acting or to write or to direct or get into special effects. As you say, we've heard people pretty much cite all of those things, all of those departments down to Doctor Who. And so I'd lean more towards that one, I think. I definitely think, it was my favorite program when I was a kid, therefore I wanted to be an actor or whatever. I think that still stands, but I do think the creativeness and uniqueness of the show is arguably the driving factor into why many people think, do you know what? I want to get into that in some way. I want to be a part of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because with my friends, as I introduce them to more Doctor Who, because, like I say, as I said before we started, that I've become more open to talking about it and talking to my friends about it and sort of listening to it. And before, I'd hide it away a little bit at times. During secondary school, it was sort of don't expose that you really like Doctor Who and you're really into sci-fi and stuff like that, because by doing that, you're different to the others. Which, I mean, that was the entire point of Doctor Who, was to be different, was to be slightly outcast. But I wouldn't say I was outcasted, but it was always thought best that I just sort of kept it on the down. And now now we've all grown up, I think a lot of people admire my love of it and sort of feel that passion. I'm almost envious of them for not having something that they're so passionate about and so motivated by. Because when, my friend, we did a commentary in the last month of the podcast, which was Vincent and the Doctor, And when we did that, at the end of it, my friend Amy, she has been watching them with me. She's been watching series 5. And then my friend Hannah has only watched... She watched very little, but I have been sending her a lot of TikToks and various other things, which I don't know whether it has been for the better or for the worse. But when it finished, they said, actually, that didn't feel like Doctor Who or what their understanding of the show was. So I suppose they are beginning to sort of understand why I love it so much and how it is able to take many shapes.
Yeah, and it does, like you say, it does absolutely change over time. Like I always say, as I said, Chris Eccleston, David Tennant, that was like the peak of that initial love for me. And then when Matt Smith took over, his era, I felt like I never fully connected with that era. Right. But when I say that, I never mean it in a nasty or horrible way. Like I still watched every week without fail. There are still episodes of that era that I love. But I don't know what it was, because at that time as well, 14 to 17, you're going through a lot of that time anyway. You're changing, life's changing. And I don't know. And like that era was very, like, in many aspects, like had that fairy tale quality, that whimsical quality. And I think at that time in my life, that's not what I felt like not what I wanted, but that's not what I felt like I connected with anymore. Yeah. But again, not in a horrible, I'm not going to say I'm a Doctor Who fan, because I was, and I was open about it. But when I look back, I think, that, and I enjoy Matt Smith's era a lot more now. But I remember on initial broadcast, I don't know. Again, must have been what I was experiencing at the time, but I never found that same sense of like adventure or like pure excitement as I did with Chris Eccleston and David Tennant. But again, for any viewers who are getting eager at the keyboard, don't mean that in any nasty way or malicious way to any of the cast, the crew, whatever. There was just something about it that didn't click with me at that time. Yes. But then when Capaldi took over, again, I was 18. Series 8 actually began when I went off to uni. Now, that's a huge change, isn't it? You know, you're moving away from home, you're living on your own, everything's happening. And I think when it shifted to that more darker focus in Series 8, again, I don't know, something clicked again. Suddenly I was like, I'm feeling this a lot more now. It's almost like the show, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but it felt like the show was growing up with me. It's like that fairy tale feeling was now not gone, but it was fairly reduced. And now we were getting a lot more, like darker moments. You had a Doctor who at that point was very
Series
blunt
8 as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, which I always loved. I appreciate people don't like that, which is fair enough. But if an alien lives for 2,000 years and like humans either keep making the same mistakes, like I think I'd be pretty annoyed as well. So
I personally really love the sort of darker side of the Doctor. I think that works very well. To show the age.
And I think Capaldi did it because I think when people say, a darker Doctor, people think, oh, no, we're going to get really edgy and it's going to be...
I remember articles at the time where there was like... The first word he says was shush, and my mum said that like it was going to be like a really bad thing. Like they were going back to William Hartnell, what I thought William Hartnell was like. And obviously that was different. But it's quite interesting that you say that timeline, because my timeline, because I'm a little bit younger than you, my timeline, I was at that sweet age of 9, I think, when Matt Smith took over, around that time. And I did find myself growing out of Doctor Who a little bit during certain bits of Series 6 and Series 7. I think it's because I didn't enjoy the arc very much, and because of the split series and stuff like that, it just felt like a bit of a slog. And then when Series 8 came along, I was not particularly in a happy place at school, and I think I was in year 8. But I loved watching it each week, sure, but I always felt disconnected from it, like it wasn't quite what I had before. But then since I've rewatched it, and I think a lot of how you watch stuff is depending on how, where you are in your life at that time.
Yes.
So I loved Series 8. Series 9 is fine, it's watchable, and I think Series 10 is really good. But I think that, like you say, the life patterns of how I'm hoping that with the 60th anniversary, I feel like I'm coming into that era that you were coming into when you were talking about how you started enjoying Capaldi.
Yes,
because I was sort of had the sort of low bits of your 11th Doctor, and now I'm going into the higher bits again. But I do join you in a love of Series 8 though. I have to say.
Best series of New Who, people. Don't sleep on it. Not trying to start any controversy, but no,
Like,
It is
do it
still
in
my
my
favorite
comments.
New Who season. Absolutely.
Mine has to be series 2 though. I have to, or 4. It's.
Ooh.
I think a lot of it is nostalgia for it. I have to
Yeah,
say,
sure.
but there is something about the whimsicalness of series 2 and those stories that I really enjoy, and then there's something about the scale and the of series 4 that works
Yeah,
for me as well. So
yeah.
yeah, so if I bring it back to acting for a little while,
Mm,
you talked a little
yeah.
bit about your sort of struggles with the industry, and I know, like I say, it was a very tricky industry to be in. You've mentioned
Mm.
a little bit of advice as well. Have you got any more little nuggets and of stuff you can do to perhaps help yourself get a foothold?
Yes. One thing I'd argue is vital. Again, this got told to me when I started drama school, which it makes me shiver to say it. But I started drama school. It'll be 10 years next year, which is mental.
Oh,
But one thing they said to us then, and I think it's even more important now, is to make your own stuff. I don't just mean like YouTube content like we do. That is one avenue. But for example, you can make like your own show reel now, which for anyone who doesn't know is like you basically film yourself acting out a bunch of scenes, either from movies or TV. It's almost like a pitch reel, because a lot of jobs now will say, "Oh, we want to see your show reel. Just want to see if you can act, in certain kind of way." And doing it now, even with the phones now, like Samsung and iPhone, the cameras I'd argue are good enough where you could easily do a self tape that way. Because then a word of advice is, I think people think, oh, a self tape, that means I have to have the best camera, the best microphone. Not really. They just want to see you. Obviously, if you have the means to do it with like a professional TV or movie camera or a professional microphone, sure, go nuts. But if you're just filming it against, your bedroom wall with your iPhone, that's fine. Like, because so many jobs ask you to do self tapes as well. And you often have less than 24 hours to send them in. But again, they're not asking you to go out and buy a DSLR camera and all these stuff. They're just like, just get your phone, film a few takes, send us the best one. That's it. So I'd say don't worry about necessarily having like the top of the range stuff to make your own stuff. Just do it. Experiment, experiment with different scenes, different genres. If you want to make content for YouTube, similar to we do, again, just experiment. Talk about stuff. I think a good springboard with YouTube is to cover stuff that you're interested in, or that you're passionate about. Because I see some people go for basically like trending topics, and sometimes you watch them do it, and you can tell they're not interested at all. They're doing it because they're going to get a lot of clicks. Fair enough, but in my head, I argue like I could do that. I could just start covering the most trendy things in the world. But if I did, am I going to be happy doing it? And the answer, honestly, is no. So yeah, make what you're passionate about, make it yourself, and just have a play around, see what you can come up with.
yes. I've always seen my YouTube as sort of like an extension of myself, and so that I'm not like talking to my parents about Doctor Who all day, that I
Yes.
start talking to somebody else or people on the internet, the camera, for example. That I think that then that passion, as I say, comes across quite nicely, and then a lot of people. I once worked with a chef who told me that I said, but you don't watch Doctor Who. Why would you want to watch any of my videos? And he says, it's not about the content itself of the subject matter. It's watching somebody who's very passionate about something that they like talking
Yes.
seamlessly about points and making points and various things like that. So once again, it goes back to that idea of it being sort of like a beautiful springboard show where a lot can come out of it. But it's not just that, is it? It's, of course, nowadays media culture is huge.
Oh God, yeah.
There's the Marvel stuff, and then even little sort of niche shows almost have got this huge developing fan base as well.
That's it. And I think that's even more cause to like try and make stuff yourself, because a lot of people think, oh well, if I put this out, who's gonna see it, but honestly, the answer to that is you never know. You honestly never know, because the internet is so vast and it's so accessible. You post stuff to YouTube, sure, you might get 3 or 4 people watching it, but what if it pops off? Or what if one of those 3 or 4 people happens to be someone in a position that can get you work? That's why, I mean, And also, I see a lot of acting jobs now. Say if it's for a corporate company, they want someone to do like social media ads for them, or they want or jobs where you're playing like someone who's an influencer, put like a role. But they'll say we prefer people who either do this or have experience. So I'd say the acting industry anyway, is because I think it used to be shunned. 5-10 years ago, you say, "Oh, I make videos on YouTube," and you get like, "Oh, right, that's nice." Like that's a bit, but like you say, I think it's because they didn't understand it at that time. They couldn't fathom how some people making lots of money off, sitting in their bedroom talking about whatever. Whereas now, I think they've cottoned on to how good it can be for them. And they're embracing like people like me and you a lot more. So if you're interested in YouTube, or if you do YouTube, and you want to veer off into like the performing arts, I'd argue keep working at your craft. There's never a guarantee. And of course, the actors in America are striking right now to try and get better rights on their end. Because, of course, you've got this threat of AI, which is both brilliant, the technology, but also terrifying, the fact that, these companies could get rid of actors in favor of, like, think of the voiceover industry. Like, that's under such threat because AI voices have gotten so scary and so good. You could just like program an AI to be like, I want a warm sounding voice with a positive tone to read this commercial for a bed mattress. And then you've just saved money paying an actor. Like it's terrifying. It's really terrifying at the minute.
We'll slowly reach. I find that kind of stuff really interesting. And I think it's almost like the sort of sci-fi things that they talked about in the 70s coming into fruition, which I think is this sort of creepy dystopia. It's brilliant.
Yes.
But it is also absolutely terrifying that I saw something recently where, because of my job, I have a lot of elderly clients or clients that aren't quite knowledgeable of AI and sort of what's real and what's fake. And there was Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, has had his face ripped off many times, and I thought, he's been in ads and things like that. But I had a look, and actually, he's had somebody had AI generated him talking, and so, from clips of him being in This Morning and various other shows, and they've been able to generate words from his mouth that aren't his own. And
it's horrific. It's really horrific.
That's the terrifying thing about that, all of that kind of stuff, I think, But we have got a little bit sidetracked into AI.
We have.
It is a fascinating subject, sure.
It is.
But
it is.
I'm going to ask you the biggest question, the one that I like to give to people beforehand, and that is, what is your favourite moment in media?
Oh, my favourite moment.
I only asked you this morning, I have to say.
You did.
You can have more than one answer. I do like to try and get it in a bit earlier than that. But
no, it's fine. I did have to wrap my brains because I thought, right, well, in my mind, I was like, how am I categorizing this? Is it a moment that I've either enjoyed the most, or is it one like I've had the most emotional response to? But then one came to me that I think is rooted in several things. It's rooted in nostalgia. It's rooted in comfort. It's rooted in, to get profound, the simplicity of life. So when I was very, very young, when I was about 2 or 3, we lived abroad, not in the UK. But with my parents both being British, as their child's growing up, the TV at the time, we didn't have satellite or anything like that. No streaming sites, certainly. This is the late 90s, for God's sake. And anytime we go back to the UK, they would bring back, tons of kids' VHSs. I think they're like, we need to stock up before he starts asking questions. And one of the earliest tapes I had, and one I still actually own today, it's probably the oldest tape I have, is it's a tape of a little children's TV show called Brum.
I remember.
I
say I remember Brum. I remember watching little bits of it. On
he's sort of grown into this. Like, people of our generation now are like, oh man, Brum was the best, and it was. And for anyone who isn't familiar, Brum is a series about this little yellow car who actually looks strangely like Bessie from Doctor Who. Actually,
I see it as more gold. But
Gold. Oh yeah, yellow
I
gold.
can't,
Yeah,
I
I get what
can't
you mean.
say what Brom ever did. Like I just remember shots of it driving round, and
That's
I
it.
like almost harassing people. But that's all I can think of.
That's not too far from
Getting
the
in the
truth.
way.
So Brum was this car who lived in a car museum,
Mm.
and every day when his owner isn't looking, and it also must be deaf because he never. But bear in mind, Brum is occupied by like a sound effect of an engine revving, yet this owner is like completely oblivious. Anyway, so he goes out every day to explore what's called the big town. It's actually Birmingham. That's where they filmed it.
Was
Um,
right.
but yeah, he goes to explore Birmingham and, like you say, harasses people, or he wants to help out. He's like, oh, there's a problem, like someone's gone missing, or
Mm.
someone's lost this, or it was like slice of life stuff, very simple. Obviously aimed at like preschoolers and stuff like that. Which when I first saw it, that was the age I was. And I think what I loved about the show is that you had a narrator who obviously speaks English, but obviously you could dub any narrator onto it. Even if you took the narration out, the visuals were enough, you knew what was going on. Because all the actors in it who Brum interacted with, they just mimed. They never actually spoke. And I think looking back, that's brilliant for any kids show because that's language barriers out the way then. Like, it doesn't matter what language you speak, you can understand it.
Mm.
But my favorite moment in media, honestly, just has to be the sequence of him each morning, like leaving the museum to the town, because it's so simple. Like, it's such a simple concept. It's such an innocent premise for a show. And when the original music anyway, like when it basically revs up, like when he actually gets out of the museum and he's heading there, it just makes you feel like excited, like happy, joyful, and intrigued, and it encapsulated me as a kid, and it sticks with me today. And I just think whenever I think of that, I think of like really happy memories. I think of just so much positivity, honestly. And I think if media can do that, not just to me at like a toddler age, if I'm still feeling that now, then I think that's pretty damn special. So yeah, I'd say that's my favorite moment in media. Little Brum leaving the museum to go and explore Birmingham, the big town. Sorry, not Birmingham, the big town.
Yes.
that look suspiciously like Birmingham, but
But that I think is the best answer that we've had for this so far.
oh bless man.
Because when that question was was given to me by Will when he decided to interview me at 1 month, and when he gave me that question, I started talking about Kingsman: The Secret Service, and I was talking about how I really fell in love when I was a bit younger with directing action scenes with this sort of beautiful, and it really got me into the idea of behind the scenes stuff, and it got me into sort of watching the collection box sets. But it's just this beautifully violent sequence. I'm sure you know the church scene from the first film.
Oh yes, I know it. Yeah.
It's beautifully violent, and there's just this beautiful flow as the camera goes along. And nowadays, I think that there's been things that have even I'd suggest maybe have topped it. But that was the first time in an action sequence I felt like my mind had just blown. There's been this crazy thing in front of me. Like recently, the new season of The Witcher came out, and there's a couple of shots in the first episode of Henry Cavill, and there's this beautiful fight choreography and stuff like that. And I put that scene in the Kingsman: The Secret Service as my favourite. And we've had sort of slightly more violent, like big action set pieces kind of things. Yeah. But that is so personal to you that I really respect that one.
I appreciate that, because when I thought it, I was like, I wonder how that's going to go down. But no, I always like to stay true to myself on that, and it is true. Like it's so. And granted, if you didn't grow up with it, like anyone out there, you'll watch it and you think, what the hell is he talking about? It's this little remote control car going, but what the memory I have with it, the link I have with it is so strong, that's why it sticks out to me, because it represents everything positive about media that can, as I said, not only impact a child but also stick with you when you're an adult, and just like Doctor Who does for many people. Well,
it's quite interesting, because when you mention that, I have not thought about Brum in many years, and when you mentioned that, I thought of my nana's house and prawn cocktail crisps
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
because we used to have prawn cocktail crisps because she didn't like other crisps. I can't remember why. We just used to get packets of prawn cocktail crisps that I hated
Nice.
and didn't like, so we had them anyway. And bottles of Coke, and we used to watch VHS. We used to watch a big VHS with like rum. That's a different show.
Oh, yes.
With Brum, Rosie and Jim, and stuff like that on
Yes.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember that, and that's taking me back to being in that house. And I've not been in that house for 6 years, if not more.
Yeah. It's
And
just, I think kids shows of that time as well. This is making me sound old,
mm,
but so many kids shows now that I catch like glimpses of and stuff are so reliant on like CGI
yes,
and all this sort of stuff. And CGI is fine. I'm not knocking CGI. CGI's made some beautiful stuff over the years, but I think, like you say, with Rosie and Jim, like that's puppets, But yet there's something very simple. Brum's a remote control car, but again, there's something very simple and understandable about that. Again, the whole like no lang. It's like Mr. Bean. There's no language barrier. You can just play the clip anywhere around the world,
yeah,
and anyone would tell. Because again, since the actors are miming, so if they're acting in distress, you'll be like, right, they're upset and all this sort of stuff. I just think that's brilliant, and I think we should maybe not push, but we should have more of that, especially for like little kids, because not everyone learns like their speech at the same time or like how to read, etc. So the more shows you have that can access them as they're like learning still in that way, where you don't need language, you just need visuals. And yeah, I think that should still be a focus, and it probably is. As I say, I haven't got kids myself. I don't watch like that TV anymore, but I'd hope there's still some kind of stuff out there in that vein.
it's quite interesting really, because I've got little cousins and we have looked after them from time to time in our house, and so I have watched a bit of kids telly. A lot of it is not particularly enthralling.
No.
But my friend, she's gonna hate me for saying this, but I was around my friend's house last night, and she's got a thing for Bluey. You might have seen it.
Oh,
The
I've heard about this. It has quite
Australian?
the adult fan base, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does.
Yeah.
It does. But I watched it and I kind of went, I understand why you like this. It's
Right.
like, it's sort of, without the lines, you can still understand it. And I think that children's TV is very, like, it's probably the most important form of television you can have. And I think it very quickly becomes just drivel. And like, the most, like, it's like when you have adults writing children. And this is one of my pet hates on television, because Doctor Who has it a lot as well, where kids are written to just be arseholes because they're teenagers. And I'm like, that's not how teenagers are. I mean, they are, and we are. I'm 21 years old, and I've just called myself a teenager. But I think there's a lot more to it, and I think that's quite a important thing to drive into kids nowadays, is a sense of morals and sort of stuff that we didn't have. Well, when I was a bit younger, it was sort of developing, but you might have not seen it at all. There's a lot more awareness of the world around you than there was before, and a lot more tolerant for things. I mean, I think about some of the tolerances that I saw in television as a kid, and I don't really see them as being an issue. But it's you could argue that it was indoctrinated into me, but it's not. It's just decent ethics, really.
Yeah, just being a decent human being at the end of it. Yeah.
But no, it's not something I expected to be talking about today. Was kids television, but I'm welcome to it. I'm welcome to it. So we've talked a little bit about the YouTube scene, and I'd like to just ask you, as we're talking about childhood, I'm not entirely sure how this is, because I looked onto your YouTube channel and you had a video from about, I think it was about 9 or maybe 11 years ago, that was a collection video, and you put it into multiple parts, because back then you had to mess around with like 10-minute videos and stuff like that. I think it was. And I remember a bit of that, but I remember having to apply for it, which was strange. I don't think you have to do that anymore.
Yes.
But I have to ask, what inspired you to make your videos in the first place? But back, I think you were at uni for some of it. I recognise that sort of uni room in one of your videos.
Yeah, I think when I started, so it was September 2012. So at that time, actually, I just started sixth form. But what inspired me to do it? I don't know, because I was always aware of YouTube. Like, I was 9 when YouTube launched. I think it was 2005 again. And, as most, you watched it sporadically for like the memes of the day and all that sort of stuff, fail army compilations and all that jazz. But I don't know. I wish, obviously seeing what YouTube is now, I wish I almost had started like earlier. But I don't know. I just never had that drive to be like, oh, I'll do this. What changed it? I think it was a few things. I just gotten a new phone, a Samsung Galaxy S2, which back then, back in 2012, that was like the peak. Because I was never an iPhone guy.
I can't remember S2.
So an S2 was that phone, and that at the time, again, that had a decent camera. And I think I'd gone on a spree of watching collection videos of all kinds, not just Doctor Who. Like I love, they're my guilty pleasure. Yeah. I love just watching someone's collection of anything. I think it's really fascinating. And at the time, I was really picking up getting the classic DVDs. I had a bit more like disposable income. So, and it was building. So I thought, oh, you know what? I'll do one myself. And that's what I did. And I made all the rookie mistakes. I did it with the torch on, which so it looks horrible. There's this big
glares on the things. I remember those.
Work, no preparation, no editing at all. Broken into 10-minute parts, like you say, for 10-minute videos. And yeah, the first few I did were like, they were mainly collection videos because that's just what I wanted to show. But then uni came around, and I call this like the repeat cycle because I find it so funny now. Like, when I got to uni, I was like, right, I'm gonna make videos fairly regularly. And it just never like I'd make a video being like, right, guys, this is happening. And then I'd do one video and then nothing. Then 6 months later, I'd do another video like, right, guys, I'm back. We're doing it. And this went on for a while. And then I think it was the summer of 2016. So I was just about to start my 3rd year at uni, my final year. And I made, and again, I don't know why. I must have just been reading about it. I made a 10-minute documentary, a very brief history about the 5 main TV channels here in the UK. So BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. And again, nowadays, very bad video. Very bad. Again, I left the reverb on the audio, so I'm just echoing the whole time. The editing's choppy. It's awful. It's just bad. It's a bad video. People are like, oh, this is still so good. I'm like, it's not. Don't watch it. But at that time, that was the first time I was really getting into like editing. So at the time, it felt really new and exciting. And it popped off. It did really well. And then from summer 2016, again, semi-regularly whilst I finished uni, but then after I finished, it was more consistent. I just started doing it more consistently. And again, there's never really been, there's shows I've had for a while, like things like the ident review, the Now review that have gone on for a few years now. But people say, oh, what's the theme of your channel? And it's like, well, it's hard because I've done so much. I guess now people would say maybe like television or like news about the industry or things like that, because I like covering that. But really, like when you look at my channel, I've done all sorts, and I think that's because I like to make what I'm passionate about. I do know YouTube likes you to know, YouTube will pop off one video and then it's like, right, you should probably keep doing this because we like that. I know that's what they want, but like I said about the trending videos, if I just did that and if I didn't feel my heart was in it, I'd hate it. And, I've seen it with YouTubers I like big popular YouTubers. I've seen it with smaller ones. They get burned out. They don't love it anymore. Yeah. It's more like a job. And I still say it to this day. I don't treat YouTube as a job. Yes, it does earn me some money, which I'm very grateful for. As any actor will tell you, any form of income is, I'll take it. But I don't say, right, I'm off, in my head, I don't wake up and think, right, I'm doing my job now. I've got to make a video. I'll make a video when I feel like it about a topic I want to talk about. And sometimes videos come out every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes they come out every week. But that's, so I've always tried to keep that because I think the minute, maybe not for everyone. Some people love the grind. I've seen some YouTubers say, yeah, I love cranking out a video every day. And that's fair enough. But for me, if I did that and my heart wasn't in it, I would absolutely hate it.
Yes. Well, I've been in some of those phases before where at one stage I've done I had like a rota where a different video was each day, and I was at school at the time, and this was like this. I don't know why I did it, but nowadays I sit on a nice pattern of one podcast, one video if not another one a month, and then that's enough. That
Yep.
keeps me busy, but it also means that I'm not tied up, so I can't go out because I have to do this video and stuff like that. But I know at one point, I think it was during lockdown, you did do a video every day, didn't you?
Yes, I
Yeah,
certainly did.
I
Because that
distinctly remember that. Yeah,
that was such a, I mean, like for everyone, when COVID happened, that was such a blow. Like, I mean, I was 2 days off from opening a brand new musical in the lead role. And we were going to tour around Yorkshire, and it was so good. The right choice, obviously, but it was so heartbreaking for everyone involved. And I remember coming home, and at first, that first day when it all felt like a wasteland, when no one left the house, because it was scary. No one knew what was going on. I remember just sort of sat there thinking, like, right, what do I do now? And thankfully, by that point, I'd been doing videos semi-regularly, so I thought, right, well, if I don't do something creative, I will literally go insane. So I sort of said to myself, right, you're going to do a video. We're going to do it every day, and we'll just see what happens. And like you said, for about, how long I think it was about around 6 months, I want to say, I kept that up for. Before, I think it wasn't that things picked back up. I think it was more, I felt, right, I've done what I wanted to do with it, and now I'll take it back to semi-regular.
I think I remember you coming off it a little bit, because I think I discovered you. I can't remember how, because I normally open with how I discovered you, but I could not remember. But I sort of remember that September time when everything came back. I think it was about then. But see, because I was at school, I was on my last year of my A-levels when COVID hit. So it meant that I got away with my A-level without having to sit my A-levels, without having to sit a 15-hour art exam. So my memories of it are going to be very different to yours. I remember it was that it didn't really hit home that it was really bad until the evening when I essentially left school and I went to work, being the last day before the pubs closed. And as much as I enjoyed that day, I guess, I remember talking to the chef, and he was very concerned about everything that was happening. And I was like, no, it'd be like 2 weeks, mate, fine. And I was like, and I was, to be honest, I was probably, he probably thought I was a right dick, because I was quite happy that I didn't have to do my exams.
Yes.
But for him, that must have been such a scary time for him.
I think it affected everyone in a very different way, depending on, like you say, what you were doing, where you were at in life, what your job was. Because, like, for actors, we were panicking. We were like, what the hell do we do? I mean, thankfully, those who do voiceovers could still do voiceover. I mean, Big Finish, what a shining example that they were just able to carry on, and it's great that they did. But at first, and I got some voice bits and here and there, but if I didn't have YouTube to fall back on, I dread thinking what I would have become. Probably very sad.
Yeah, well, I think much the same on the same level of, without the internet, without the watch-alongs, etc. Without that, I think that I would have really struggled during the lockdowns.
Yes.
And it wasn't just necessarily because, I was quite happy to be at home. I didn't really like school, and the idea that I was home and I could, get up at 10 o'clock, play an Xbox. Yeah. Although I have to say, I didn't do that. My family did not allow me to do that. My mum would be very adamant to say that I did get up at exactly 9 o'clock because we did Joe Wicks every morning, and it was a very strange thing that we did in our family, where we'd all get up in our pajamas and then find sections of the living room to stand in order to do it.
Excellent.
But like you say, because it was such a weird time, I look back on it thinking of all the weird things we used to do, and it felt like we were such a part of history. But then again, a very, very scary part of it.
Yeah.
But like you said, thank God for things like Big Finish. And they say that sometimes in terms of creativity, restrictions are like the biggest thing you could have. Within that time, the amount of fan projects that came out, podcasts that were able to be developed because of it, and a lot of my friends and I started writing scripts and started talking about different podcast ideas because people were available to do that kind of stuff and they had the time. So in that respect, I think that I kept myself occupied with that and a few other things that I had to do. And I think without that, I think that my life would have been very different. And I think that the course of my life changed because of that. Yeah. And I hate to say that I loved it, but I admire and respect and feel like it was a necessary evil in order
sure.
for certain things to reach where it needed to go. Everything has a purpose is always been something that I've been told to believe in.
Absolutely.
So as you were talking about this sort of huge scale that you have to do with your YouTube videos,
Sure.
I like to ask, for me, I have a bit of a process when it comes to making videos, and I wouldn't say it's very unorthodox. It's pretty much what everyone else does. What I like to think is what everyone else does, but I'd like to know, what is your process when it comes to making videos? Because do you have any special habits or things like that?
Special habits. When I edit, and I appreciate not everyone's like this, so this might sound like someone's idea of hell, but I like a lot of noise, so I'll edit, and I'll either normally have one of my vinyls spinning on the turntable in the other corner of the room, or I'll have a podcast on or a big finish. And people, they're like, how on earth can you like edit and do that? And I don't know. I can somehow still zone into the editing and make sure the sound's all correct, and yet have music or an audiobook or a podcast on. And I love it. And I find it really helps me work. But again, some people like the opposite. It's like I can only have the editing thing in front of me. So I'd say that's one of the things I tend to do. Aside from that, I always argue there's not really obviously in COVID, as I said, I developed more of like a schedule, but nowadays there's not really any process. It's more just, I'll often see, like with the unscripted videos I do, it'll just be, I've seen an article or I've read something and I just think, oh, I'd like to talk about that. And then I go and do it. But with things like the documentaries or the ident review, again, it's just more when the ideas come, with like the ident review, oh, I've seen these new idents on telly, I'll talk about that. Or a documentary is more difficult, I guess, because I have to find a subject that I want to make a documentary about.
Yes.
And then it's finding the time to write the script, do the research first, of course, and then write the script, and then put it all together. And that, people recommend me topics all the time, which I'm grateful for. But some of them, you think you've got to have I know you could just use pictures, but I like to use video footage where possible. I think it makes it more dynamic. And some topics you think, well, there's no footage of it. Like, and I don't want to just be
you don't want to be stagnant.
I don't want to be a PowerPoint slideshow.
Yeah.
But and then other ones, people have suggested ones where there's tons of video footage, but I look into the idea initially, and for me personally, it might not just set my fire alight. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's curious, but I'm not mad about it.
Yeah.
And again, it's back to that thing of, if I'm not passionate about it or invested, I always think that's going to come across to the audience. I think as good of an actor as anyone can be, I think hiding your lack of interest is nigh on impossible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you talk about actors who are in films, they've probably been paid a lot of money, and you watch their performance and you think, wow, they don't care. Like they're taking the paycheck. I think it's like that with YouTube videos. And I think you can always tell when someone's making content that they aren't bothered about.
Yeah, I think that there's a group of people, especially when there's sort of a lot of artificial. I find like with like quiz shows particularly, or sort of big chat shows, there's a lot of, we're really happy, we're so happy, we're just grinning and laughing, and even though that wasn't very funny, we're acting like we've never seen anything like it. And I think that when that sort of saturation of comedy and that sort of stuff really grinds on my teeth, like I can't. There's certain, I don't want to mention any of the shows, but there's certain shows that just don't work for me for that aspect. And I don't know whether it's that they actually are having fun or I just don't connect with it. But it always goes back to that idea that if it feels artificial, it doesn't connect with me or connect with an audience. But when it comes to your process, then if I put it in a slightly better terms than my original question, so it goes sort of research first. Yep. And so if it's the ratings videos, that's my favorite series on your channel. I know that it's
thank you.
It's off the table for now, I suppose eventually it will come back for series 1 and maybe the Wilderness Years, the TV movie, etc. at some point.
Yes. Yeah, I do need to finish the Wilderness Years. Yeah, where did I get to? I got to the TV movie
I
on
think
AM. Yeah.
I remember season 26.
Yes, yeah. And then I had a long gap, and I definitely did the Wilderness Years part 1. So that
Did
was
you? I don't.
eight.
Yeah, okay. I must have missed one.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah.
worry. So I put it all in a playlist. It's
I'll
all
have a
there.
look for it later. Yeah.
Yeah, I do need to finish the Wilderness Years. So 97 to 2004 is what I need to do
Right.
next. And it's hard because now I've got a Doctor Who themed channel, AMTV Who, because I wanted to sort of make it its own thing. But part of me is like, for a nice round off sake, I think I want to put Wilderness Years Part 2 still on the main channel, so it's
Yes,
with the
yeah.
others. And then when I get to New Who, then I'll put it on the Who channel, because then it's like, that's a fresh start.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And people ask all the time, which it's very humbling. I'm really glad that people like yourself and others like really enjoy me talking about numbers for 40 minutes. But again, that's a project where I've always been fascinated by numbers, statistics. I love it, right? So I thought Doctor Who viewing figures, of course, I'll do a series on that. And there was a very brief part of me, at first that thinks like, who's going to watch that? Like you rambling for 40 minutes about how many people tuned in to watch like The King's Demons or something like that.
Yeah.
But then that quickly went away because I was excited by it. I was like, no, I want to do it. I want to make it. I want to see how it turns out. And sure, thankfully people liked it. And I managed to get it sort of semi-consistent. It's hard with gaps because people, about a lot of the series I do, after a while, people say, where's Doctor Who viewing figures? Where's the ident review? Where's this? Where's that? And I always find it difficult to explain because I've got many different like interests, as a content creator, things that I either want to talk about. And I think just who I am as a person, I've got to be like in the right lane for it mentally.
Yes, I'm exactly the same.
Some people, and I admire the hell out of them for it, can switch like that. And, for me, it's not that I'm saying I'm not in the lane of Doctor Who. I'm typically in the lane of Doctor Who. But, it's a lot of time because, again, like you said, I've got to write the script. So I've got to do the research of the viewing figures. I've got to do the research of all like the publicity stuff. I've got to add my own thoughts to it as well, which for some stories, if I haven't seen them in a while, that means I have to rewatch them. So it's a lot of time to make just one of those videos. And I'm always in a Doctor Who lane, but I've really got to be like, every day I'm either watching Doctor Who or I'm listening to Big Finish. I've got to be in that zone, and that fires me up to do it.
Yeah.
And I've tried it when I'm not feeling it. I've tried sitting down. I get Microsoft Word up. I write like the intro paragraph, and then I sit there and I'm like, I'm not that I don't want to make it, but I'm just like, I'm not in the right headspace for this.
Yes.
And sometimes that could be for a week, 2 weeks. Sometimes it's for months. But I always just tell people with any of the series I do, like last year, I did an opening installment of a documentary about the Pet Shop Boys, they're one of my favorite bands ever.
Okay.
And the first part was just covering like their beginnings, their first album. And again, in my head, I was like, so every part is going to be like their different era, if you like, with every album. It's been nearly a year.
Yes.
And again, what's lovely is people write these lovely comments like, really love this video, really love the style, hope part 2's coming. And it kills me every time because I'm like, I always say part two will come. One day, part 2 of that documentary, just as part 2 of the Wilderness Years for the viewing figures, one day that will happen, that will appear. But I can't predict it. And I've tried putting dates on things for projects, and I either miss it, and then that stresses me out, as you said, because then you feel like you're obliged to, when in reality you're not really. So yeah, I don't put dates on things anymore. So I'm just like, I'm sorry it's taking forever, but if it takes a year for every new installment, then that's what it's going to be. But
yeah. I'm exactly the same. Last night I sat down. I was in my bed and I was trying to write something. So I'm working on a little like narrated piece of Doctor Who. It's like a short trip kind of style. Yeah. And I was aiming to write one of them, and I planned it out over a couple of weeks ago, and then I did sort of 2 days on it, 2 evenings on it. And then I haven't touched it in a week or two. And I sat down to watch it, and I went to read it and to hopefully write a bit more. And I went, I don't think it's going to happen tonight. I don't even know what this detail looks like. And I started drawing what the detail was, and it was a ship I was designing on my little pad. And I definitely see what you mean. I've also got a series called Forging the Cybermen, which I took a lot of inspiration, I think, from your videos, to sort of go into sort of the history of the Cybermen, because they're my favourite creature. I wanted to take a look at them and their different aspects. And when I did, so I did 2 parts. So I got up to, I think, series 8 or series 10 maybe. But so there's that little bit left, and it does become a bit of a challenge when you just sit there and sort of. Sometimes I'm not in the mood for it to be funny, and I think that it comes across if your head or your heart is not in the script, then I don't think that it's something you can fake. Like like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yes. My next thing, we were talking about my favourite series of yours. I've been because of my job, I'm allowed to listen to a lot of stuff as I work. But even before that, I listened to a lot of AMTV radio.
Oh right, yeah.
And over the last week or two, I have been listening to a couple more while I was writing the questions for you. And I have to ask: is AMT radio something that you intend to do? And what was your experience like doing I think you did 2 series, didn't you? You did 2 books with different interviewers.
Yeah, so there's on the channel it's split into 4 seasons, but yeah, really the recording time it was like 2.
Was it?
Was
it 2 years that I'm thinking of? Less. Than,
essentially. Yeah. So I'll answer the second question first, just because that's how my mind works. So I mean, I started it because again, it was during the lockdown 2020, and like I think a lot of people did, I listened to more podcasts than I did. And it sort of made me think, it corresponded with the time actually when I'd upgraded my setup. So I got like a new desktop computer, I got a new microphone that was actually decent. And I thought, okay, I've actually got, decent kit now to do something like this. And obviously Zoom had exploded and stuff like that. And at that time, Zoom Premium, they basically suspended that, because so many people were split from their families. So they were just like, anyone can stay on a call as long as they like,
Yes, yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, let's try. I'd never done a podcast. I'd never produced a podcast, but I was like, you know what? Again, this whole thing of making your own stuff. I was like, let's try it. So I reached out to Philip Hawkins, lovely Phil, who I know you're well acquainted with as well. And I was just like, it probably was an awful pitch to him. I was like, yeah, I'm doing a podcast. I've never done one before. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but do you want to come on? And he said yes, bless him. And that was the start of it. And I think, like we're doing now, I think the best podcasts are always like this, conversational. Like, yes, you have some questions you want to ask, but it's not rigid. It's very free flowing. I love that.
I have mixed round. I don't think any of the order of the questions I've given you tonight have actually been in the order I wrote them or the order I intended. And I sort of write transitions, to try and sort of make it more natural. But even then, the way that the conversation goes means that you might answer questions without even being asked them. So that kind of element. But
yeah, absolutely. And then I started with like different other content creators mainly, and then I expanded into asking people like say from Big Finish and stuff like that. Which again, as I mentioned earlier, I was like I didn't have really any apprehensive thoughts about messaging them, like the whole this person, do I have the right to email someone like this? And it's like, well, yeah, of course you do. Like it's they're not I'm not saying it in a bad way, but they're not gods. They're not like above you in any way. So yeah, I started doing that. And again, like you said earlier, because of COVID, people had more time to give and were willing to do it. So I spoke to some lovely people through those conversations. James Goss was one of them, one of the not just Big Finish writer. I mean, he's done so much for Doctor Who over the last like 20 years. Many books, the website in its early days, and it's just fun. As I'm doing with you now, I like chatting with people. I like going on tangents. I like learning more about people, and a lot of my guests after we'd finished recording would say, thank you for making that a really like chilled out, because I think some of the Big Finish guests may have thought, oh, okay, it's called AMTV radio, so it's like a very serious, very bum 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 style thing. And then I think when it wasn't, they appreciated that, because again, and I think being an actor as well helped, because I could relate to some of like the struggles they talked about, especially if they were actors too. And I loved it. See, I had those 2 bulk recording blocks. The last episode was, I think, Christmas 2021 with the lovely Guy Signer from
Yes,
Allo
that
Allo.
was the name. Yes, yeah.
What a lovely man he was. And yeah, obviously, so that recording period ended. And then 2022 was when things started becoming like more normal again and real life sort of resumed itself. And obviously, you know, people had less time to give, which was fair enough because they had their own lives to do. And I always made it up front when I emailed guests. I was like, I can't pay you. You know, it's not a paid gig. And I'd never hold it against anyone for saying no for that. I get it. You know, we've all got to earn. We've all got to put food on the table. So yeah, I thought, okay, people have less time and I have less time. And I always prefer bulk recording a season of the show, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I don't like leaving long gaps. And I thought, I don't realistically have the time. So to answer then your first question, yeah, I would like to bring AMTV Radio back. I'm not saying it's cancelled, even though it's been nearly 2 years. That's what I mean. Like, I never like to say a show is cancelled outright, because I think if you say that, of course you can bring it back, but then you'll always have people going, oh, you said it was cancelled. And so I just like to keep it open-ended. So yes, AMTV Radio will return in maybe in a different, slightly different format. I don't know. But yes, eventually I would very much like to bring it back in some way, shape or form.
That's why I've always kept to the monthly. Well, recently I've kept to the monthly thing so that it is doable. But may I ask, when you talk about doing bulk recordings, how close together were those sessions?
Oh, I think in that either the first or second season, sometimes I'd record 2 a day.
Oh, really? So you'd have like a morning slot and an afternoon slot almost?
Pretty much, yeah. I think when I'd email people and if they said yes, I'd just be like, right, cool. And I'd look at my calendar and see how soon I could do it. Not to rush it, but I was like, the sooner I do it, the more I can edit it. And they were all quite straightforward to edit and put together. And then I thought, the quicker I can get how many episodes, like 10, 13, whatever, quicker they're all in the can, then I can schedule like release dates and it can all be like, say, 1 a week. It can all be consistent and neatly packaged. Because my worst fear was saying, right, here's season 4, for example. We've got 10 episodes. Oh, but here's 3, 1 a week. Oh, now episode 4 is a month. And now episode 5 is half a year. The thought of that, definitely. I didn't like. I know I say I don't try and schedule, but I thought for a podcast, I was like, I think it's always good to have like some consistency. So I was like, if I'm doing it, I want like, say, a 2-week time frame where I know I can record with every guest that I want, and that I can edit it all together. So that's what I mean by bulk recording, just trying to get all of them as close together as possible, if possible, of course.
Yeah. So, because I like that idea. Well, I don't know if I could do. I think I'd find it too exhausting. I'm not going to lie to you to do all of that. But at the minute, I've got just like as of talking to you now, I'm always thinking about doing the next thing, and then somebody mentioned something to me yesterday, which means that I'll go, oh, we'll do that the month after, and I've got sort of like notes in my phone of things we can do and stuff like that. So. But then, like I said earlier, it goes back to the idea of juggling and being able to juggle all of that stuff. And all of that is just so fun to me. And like you say, the conversational stuff in the people that you speak to. I mean, it's bizarre because of the internet space, because we've spoken, yet we haven't really engaged with each other.
Yes.
I was like, oh yeah, I know Adam. I was like, oh yeah. So I said to my parents that I was interviewing you today. Yeah. And I was like, oh, he was on the vinyl that I got. And he was like, all right. They don't quite understand what I do. They don't understand my hobby.
That's fair enough.
But I was trying to explain to them that this is quite cool to me. This is exciting for me and Will. And basically meant keep quiet. Stop shouting and knocking on my door. As I was saying, that we've known each other for a little while but never really spoken. The first time I sort of interacted with you properly was on the Red Dwarf podcast that's entitled Everybody's Dead, Dave, which you do with the pre-mentioned Philip Hawkins.
Yes.
So I think you've been doing that. I distinctly remember you starting in maybe 2020 doing that.
It was, either there or early 2021, around then, yeah. And that was Phil. That was Phil's idea, because he's been a lifelong Red Dwarf fan. And he'd seen on one of my Sunday catch-up, which is like a Q&A thing, basically. Someone had asked me what I thought of Red Dwarf, and I must have said, oh, well, I've never seen Red Dwarf. And he was like, what? That's crazy. So he suggested to me, why don't we do a podcast where we watch it from beginning to end, from, perspective of he's the lifelong fan and I'm a relative newbie, as we say on the show.
Yes.
And it's been great because I've fallen in love with Red Dwarf as we've gone on. It is a great show, and Phil's got to relive it. And it's so funny how in some episodes our opinions are like completely aligned on because we don't talk about it beforehand. We'll watch the episode separately and we'll share our thoughts when we record. And sometimes we're perfectly aligned, and sometimes we couldn't be like further apart. And I just think that's such an interesting perspective. Then you're not always got the same thing. And yeah, it's carried on. We've had a bit of a break at the minute, but again, this is real life stuff. He's gotten really busy. I've gotten really busy, and trying to, in lockdown, we had that freedom. We could always say, yeah, let's do it Monday night because we didn't have anything else. Whereas now we are still planning on recording. So for anyone who watches and notices there hasn't been an episode for a while, more are coming.
Oh, good.
It's just, again, it's finding time. It's difficult.
Yes, I was ironically watching them, and then I was watching them on Netflix because there was this documentary that you probably haven't seen, but it was talking about the most recent episode came out. It was called The Promised Land, and it was on Dave. You may have seen it advertised. That came out, and then that made me go, oh, I'd like Red Dwarf. I haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen a couple of. I watched Back to Reality and stuff like that, but I never really watched it. And I thought, oh, I can go back and have a look. And they were all on Netflix at the time, so I went back and watched them. And then so I could match up with the podcast, I started again, and it was always interesting to get a different perspective.
Yes.
Of episodes, and there are certain episodes that I really loved that you two sort of more lukewarm to, but episodes that I was happy to see. Recently, I say recently, a couple of weeks ago, I watched the opening to series 10, and I thought I'm probably the only person that likes this episode, and then I found out that you also quite liked it, which I was like, oh, that's good. But I am a little bit behind at the minute. I have series 10. It's just finding the time to watch it, and at the minute I'm trying to watch Doctor Who again, and then like you say, like we said before, I keep falling to sleep during shows now, and I didn't used to do that before.
Yeah, time is our greatest enemy, unfortunately. So.
Yes, but as we were talking before, I'm able to, in my job, listen to a lot of stuff, and something that I listen to a lot is not just podcasts, but is also a lot of Big Finish.
Yes,
which I've forgotten when it was. I think it was last December.
Yes,
I believe it was, that it was announced that you were going to be in the 9th Doctor Adventures.
Yes,
with
that's right.
The man himself, Christopher Elccleston. I mean, that is so. That must have been so surreal. I remember talking to you at the time about how surreal it must have been, and I saw your video on it. So I don't want to go over stuff you already said, but.
Oh no! I'm happy to give it in brief. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
please do.
It was, mental. And the fact is, when it got announced, that was December 2022, and I'd sat on it for a year and a few months by that point, and it was incredibly difficult because, when you're part of the Who community, something like that, the minute it happens, you just want to be like, guys, like. But of course, in a professional capacity, I was like, no, I've just got to keep it under my hat. And I knew, being a Big Finish fan, when I recorded the first one, because at that time the sets were coming out every 3 months, and I noticed my story it said series 2 box set 4, so I went right, and then I looked at the pre-order thing and I was like, February 2023, right, okay. But no, so what happened was, and again, this is the benefit of making your own content. The end of series 2 of AMTV Radio, so we're talking January 2021 when I recorded it, was with Helen Goldwyn, who we mentioned earlier, who for Big Finish, she has acted, she writes, she directs, jack of all trades. Yes. So chatted with her, and I always forget if it was in the episode or after we recorded, but we were just talking a bit about acting, how, as I mentioned to you, I was meant to be in this musical, then COVID happened, and I talked a bit about my eyesight as well, because I'm visually impaired to some degree. And again, I can't remember, we did get onto it naturally, I can't remember how, but we did.
Yes, because I listened to that episode, I heard it on the behind the scenes, and I thought, oh, I wonder what that, maybe there was inklings towards it, and I listened to it, I do remember, And
she, at the time, she'd said to me, oh, well, send in your voice reel, which is like your show reel, but just audio. Send that into Big Finish. Obviously, no guarantees, but they'll have it on file. So I did. I sent it in around that time, so January 2021. And it was about... It was September 2021. I was walking to work at my job, and I get a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. And I answered it, and it was, "Oh, hi, it's Helen." I was like, "Oh, hi, how are we doing?" And she said, "Yeah, so there's this part come up, a visually impaired character, and I'd very much like you to do it. Would you be interested?" So, of course, even then, I was like, "Yeah." Like, God, I didn't know what series or range it was for, but I was like, "Yeah, chance to work for Big Finish, yeah." And then she went, "Would you like to know which Doctor you'll be working with?" So then I was like, "Oh my God, it's a Doctor Who." So I was like, "Yes, tell me." And she said Christopher Eccleston. And I was like, "Oh my God." Because as I've said to you, that's my first Doctor. That is one of the reasons I got into acting. So I was like, holy shit, man. This is just... I was in the square outside work, probably looking a bit deranged because I had like the biggest grin on my face. And then I had to go into work and I couldn't say anything. Yeah. Everyone was like, "You're happy today?" I said, "Oh, I'm having a good day today." And then it was November 2021. We recorded it, and we were very lucky because at that time, the Omicron variant of COVID had just come about.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't as deadly, but, there was still a lot of uncertainty and everyone was getting their jabs. So I think there was a cast of about 6 of us, but they could only have 3 in the studio in London to record. And when they told us that beforehand, I thought, oh, well, they're not going to get me in. And I was fine with that. I was like, that's cool. I'll do it from home. But then Helen said, "Oh, no, it'll be you, Chris, and Harky who plays Doyle." And I was like, oh, my God. Like, I'm going to stand in a booth with Christopher Eccleston. So then obviously went to London and... people ask it like, were you nervous? I think the 5 minutes, not even that, the first 2 minutes when he arrived, just because, it's like, oh my God, like it's Christopher Eccleston. Yeah. But then after that, he is the epitome of what everyone says. Like, he is the most chilled out, relaxed, non-egotistical person in the world. Like, he does not view himself as like this celebrity, despite everything he's done. He's just that, that lad from Salford who's up for a chat, up for a bit of banter. And yeah, by the time we got in the booth, like any nerves had gone. It just felt like I was working with, like you're doing jobs, like 2 actors that I got along with, you could have good banter with, and not in a bad way, but I sort of forget like, oh yeah, he's the 9th Doctor. It's like, oh, I'm just working with Chris and Harky, like, and it was such a fun environment, and obviously Helen was there to direct, and it was just such a lovely experience. And when I left, it's like that pinch yourself. You're like, I just recorded Doctor Who with Christopher Eccleston. And then, it got announced a year and a bit later. And I was like, oh my God, the word is out. And then it came out. And I tell you what, listening to the finished thing was so weird. Because like you, I listened to a lot of Big Finish and hearing my voice with all like the sound effects and the music, I was like, this is weird, man. I was like, I don't know if I like... Most actors will tell you they hate listening to them. I don't know what it is. It's a weird actors thing. But most actors say, oh, I can't stand my own voice. But I wouldn't say I couldn't stand it. It was just odd because I was like, that's me.
Yes,
like, that's my
felt
voice.
Something similar as well, going, I recognise this person, but not in this situation. Like,
exactly, because it was still like my voice, strange, my accent, but it was in as a character. So it's like, yeah, and I was really humbled again. I had a lot of lovely comments from it, which was very kind. If any of you were those comments, thank you so much. And then, and obviously that story ended on, well... spoiler warning here. That story, I won't go into like the main plot, but obviously that first story ended quite open-endedly. There wasn't like a definitive thing for my character Callan or Doyle his dog. So I thought, okay, they've left it open-ended. But honestly, when I finished recording it, I thought, then they're surely not going to go like straight away with another one. Like they'll leave it, whatever. So then imagine my surprise in August 2022, so near half a year or so after we recorded the first one. The first one hadn't even been announced yet. Helen emails me to be like, "Hey, do you want to do it again?" I was like, "What?" So, and of course I said yes. So in September, again, went back down to the studio, and thankfully this time everyone could come and be in the studio, which was lovely. And yeah, it was so fun revisiting, and it was so easy dipping back into those characters, which surprised me and Harky. Because again, for us, it had been 10 months since we recorded, and I know Harky, bless him, because obviously he's playing a dog, which is not an easy part to play. He was like, "Oh, how am I going to remember how to like do it?"
Yeah,
because it's a very instinctual thing.
The dog, I think the dog works so well in that episode. I think because I listened to it earlier today. I think Doyle is brilliant because you can tell by the way it's played that it's a dog, that they're playing a dog. But there's something about like the tonality of it. That makes it feel like a dog. But it also, I think maybe because of the effects, it feels very organic. And then of course you've got yourself there, which I think makes an awesome dynamic between yourself, the Ninth Doctor, and Doyle, which plays a lot into the second episode as well.
Absolutely.
I do wonder though, as I did a re-listen to them both earlier today. I do wonder, did Roy Gill ever say that this part was maybe specified towards you? Because you talked about your eyesight and things like that. Was that just a coincidence, or was that something that was branched off?
I think it was more coincidence, because if I remember rightly, Roy said to us in the first one, and I think he said, I can't remember if he says it in the behind the scenes, but I believe his mother suffers from what's called macular degeneration, where you start to lose the vision in your eye. And I think it was that mainly what inspired him to write a character like that. And then I think on Helen's end, again, that was the coincidence, because now I've remembered the link. So when I told her about the musical I was doing that got cancelled, it's about this guy who's blind, a true story.
Right,
and of course, I said, obviously, it was important to me, someone who has a visual impairment. So I think maybe when Roy, I don't know, maybe sent her the script or the outline, she must have thought, oh, visual impairment. I chatted with someone who is visually impaired and an actor, because before the phone call, I forgot to mention it, I got a brief email from her, but it was just saying, oh, just remind me, like you did say you were visually impaired, just like a refresh thing. So I don't think it was written for me necessarily. I think it was inspired from Roy's mother. And then it was just the coincidence that Helen had happened to speak to me. But then again, that's the whole thing of making your own content. You never know. If I hadn't have made AMTV Radio, if I hadn't have chatted with Helen, someone else would have been Callan. So,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Everything always happens for a reason. Everything springs off something for that purpose. And I really enjoyed your 2 episodes. One, you got to face off against 2 quite big monsters in Doctor Who. So we'll start with the first one, of course, the Vashnarada. But also, is that spoil?
No, I think it's
spoilers, I guess.
Yeah,
minor
spoilers. I think it's in the description, so I think you're covered.
There's also, I didn't notice it at the time. It's kind of a bit of a twist for me, but the villains of the first episode, which I told myself I'd remember earlier today, but haven't, the Kalani or something like that. They are in the first and third episode, and their thing is about color spectrums. And I thought that was used really well in that episode, and I loved the idea that they sort of turned your character's visual impairment into something that made them uniquely capable to deal with that situation. I thought that worked really well. And of course, the Vashnara, I mean, such cool creatures to face off against. And they're working incredibly well in audio as well.
They certainly do. And even reading the script, this is before they've put on any of the sound effects or anything. Even just reading those lines, like imagining you're being, like chased by these things is terrifying, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's a moment that it's a very visceral script, I think, because there's a moment when your mother attacks Bran, I think he's called, with a flare or something along those lines, and I can sort of imagine, maybe this is my sort of slightly grotesque mind, but like it's sort of like shoved into his eye or something like that, and it's there's like a light effect on the thing, and it's sort of like this creepy ghoul walking towards you like a zombie. And I really enjoyed that visual nature of Red Darkness. And then, of course, we go into Series 3, and boom, he's back again for another appearance. I mean, that must... I was going to make a joke about how the biggest acting performance you made during the entire process was the one where you had to keep it secret, not just once but twice. It was almost like we were being betrayed.
Do you know what? The upside of the second one was I didn't have to wait as long
Mm.
because I think the box set released 3 months after the first. So I think I recorded it
It did, yeah.
September 2022, and I think it got announced right at the end of March. So it still was about
Yeah,
it was about 6 months,
That's
but
about
not a year and a bit.
Yeah.
But, I remember between the two, though, after Red Darkness came out, people were asking to chat with me, like I chatted with Mr. TARDIS on one of his videos. And this is where I felt awful because, bless him, obviously at the end of that, bear in mind, no one knows the second one's coming, only the first one's out. And he goes, right, so, Callan and Doyle, are they coming back? And I
remember that question.
I
Yeah.
had to sit there and I had to say, deadpan as possible. I was like, if they want me back, I'm up for it, knowing full well I'd done another one. Now I know what it's like, when you have these like franchises in movies and the actors act all coy, like, oh well, I don't know if I'm coming back. I understand now. It's hard because obviously when it's your mate as well, like because I've seen Mr. TARDIS a few times in real life as well, and when it's your mate, you just want to be like, yeah, of course I'm coming back, but you sign a contract and you've got to adhere to it. And he obviously knows this, as most Who fans know.
Yeah.
So when it did get revealed, he jokingly like retweeted my announcement. It says, "You betrayed me, like you lied to me."
Yeah.
And I was like, I had to lie to Phil, recording Red Dwarf. He was like, "Yes, yeah, so is there more coming?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "You're lying to him." But any actor who signs contracts like that, it's just, I get why they do it because it was. I kept that first one secret for a year, but then look at the buzz that happened when it was finally out there. I mean, it was lovely. So I get it. But yeah, it's so hard to sit there in front of your mates and be like, oh, I don't know. Ha ha ha.
Was there anyone you had to tell? Like within your family, like, did you tell your partner or your mum? And because I feel like I would really struggle not to just turn to Will or somebody and just go, by the way, I can't tell you, but
I did tell my mum and dad, mainly because they helped get me to London that year.
Yeah.
Because trains were still a bit iffy. So can you just drop me off at this undisclosed location and come back in 7 hours? It sounded a bit weird. So logistical reasons, but I did share it with my partner because I trust her, and I knew she wasn't going to go blabbing on social media. But I didn't no further than that.
Yes.
Because I was like, the minute you go further than that, that's it then. But no, but on the whole, yeah, I'm impressed with myself that I kept it under the hat, to be honest, but yeah.
And then of course the second episode you're facing against the boss, but also the maggot creatures from the Green Death. I mean, when I think of a lot of classic Who, the Green Death is one of the biggest stories there, and
yes,
for such an interesting story as well, not just one that is about eco-activism and sort of those political messages in that respect, but is once again a really good script. And the Doctor almost has this sort of sense of affection for you, and I thought this was very, very sweet because it kind of, a lot of people have complained about the Ninth Doctor not really having an arc within his stories at the minute.
Sure.
Because they don't want to, Christopher Eccleston I feel like doesn't really want a companion, and to be honest I don't want the Ninth Doctor to have a companion in my personal opinion, because if he does, then I think it decredits Rose as being the person that changed his life.
Yeah.
Or changed his personality round. But there's a beautiful moment in that story. The Gift, I think it's called, is it not?
The Green Gift.
The Green Gift, that was it. Sorry, yes. In which the Ninth Doctor is talking to the pilot character played by Louise Jameson, and says that, are you sort of investigating this ship? Are you having, this colony ship? Are you looking round for yourself and for your own interest? Or are you just surveying whether this is the place for Callan or not? Yeah. And there's also the element of the Doctor doesn't really need us anymore, but he's running a test. I think that was quite an interesting thing for that story as well.
I like that development for both Callan Doyle and the Doctor. And again, as I point out to people, early on in the Green Gift, there's a few lines that indicates they've been on a few more more travels.
Noticed that earlier.
As any Doctor Who fan knows, you give fans a gap in the timeline, and event at some point or another, it's going to get filled. So I'd like to think, again, if Helen Goldwyn or whoever from Big Finish came to me and said, right, we want to plug that gap or we want to do some more stuff, would you do? I'd love to do it, absolutely. It was a joy to do. It's so surreal to say that in some form I've been a Doctor Who companion. That's very surreal because that's what I've wanted to be since I was 9 years old. Yeah, no, if they absolutely said we want to do this or that, I'd be more than game to do that.
Yes. So, is there any ranges in particular that you'd like to join, or monsters that you'd like to face?
Oh, well, I mean, I'd love to have a crack against like the Daleks and the Cybermen. I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah,
but to go a bit more left field, I'd love to. And they are making a reappearance. I think it'd be really funny to go against the Crotons, just because they're so lovably lovably daft. And I know they're making an appearance in the Final River song box set, which is very exciting. But yeah, I think Callan would be like, what on earth is this? And I think Doyle's comments on the Crotons would be quite hilarious. Like, how do you describe the Crotons? And ranges.
Maybe not even playing Callan, just playing somebody else. Just in general,
Oh, I'd love to do the War Master. I think the War Master is my favourite range to listen to. Because I think Derek Jacobi every time. Bear in mind, I think people don't give him credit. He's taken a part that he only got on TV for 45 minutes, and only 5 minutes of that was he actually the Master. And yet, when you listen to him on Big, it's like he's got this fully formed character who knows exactly who he is, what he stands for, and some of those stories are gut wrenching. And like when I listen to Big Finish, if I'm walking, I always walk, but there have been moments in the War Master where I've physically had to stop walking because what's happening is so powerful. Like there's a moment in, I think it's Volume 6, Killing Time.
I've recently got into the War Master stuff, so
yes,
I think it may have been in April that I ordered the 4 box set, the first 4 which were on sale, and then I picked up Self Defense because I'm a big David Tennant fan, and then I've bought not Escape from Reality. That's the only one I'm missing. Solitary Confinement, the new one. So I have 1 to 7, and then 9 now. So I'm just missing Escape.
Is it Escape from Reality? Yeah.
Yes, that's the only one I'm missing. But I've only listened to 1, 2, and 3, and Self Defense. So I don't know a lot about it. But I mean, Master of Callus, I think, has just been one of my favourite listens this year.
It's great, isn't it?
The story with the Ood and the conflict between it is so different to Doctor Who that it works so well. And
I love Anti-Genesis as well. That box set is. I don't know if you've got around to that yet.
I've downloaded it this morning. So because like I said, I was saying earlier, because I can listen to practically a box set a day, it means that I can. So I keep a download of something. Like at the minute, I've got your episodes, I've got Anti-Genesis, Legacy of Time that I was listening to, and some 10th Doctor adventures.
Honestly, I think you'll love Anti-Genesis, but I won't spoil it. But the moments in Killing Time, Volume 6, this isn't a spoiler because they're on the cover, but there's 2 stories where the War Master meets with an older Joe Grant in one and an older Nyssa in another. And I won't say, but there were moments in both of those where that, as I said, I had to stop walking because what was happening was so like, oh my God. So when you get round to Killing Time, I'd love to know your thoughts on it because it bowled me for 6, but in a good way. I was like, oh my God. And the War Master series I'd love to get involved with. The War Doctor Begins as well, because Jonathan Carley's like fab. I think I love that series.
I haven't touched that yet. I haven't gone into
that. Good. It's good because I love the War Doctor stuff that we got with John Hurt. Like those 4 box sets are great. I know people are like, there's too much Time War. Generally, I quite like the Time War stuff that we've got. Like the 8th Doctor Time War stuff's really good. Even Susan's War, like the little spin-off with Susan. I
remember
really
you being quite a big advocate of that box set. It's not one I've listened to, but I remember in your videos you saying, I know this is a bit of a weird take, but I'm very much into this set called Susan's War.
Yeah, it's honestly because again you think, oh well, okay, Susan in the Time War, but I'd say like any sort, give it a chance, just listen to it, and I'd argue it's worth it, but that's just me.
That's the interesting thing that I've had with a lot of Big Finish is that some sets that I've listened to, I've gone, I'll give it a chance. I'm not particularly like excited, for it or anything like that. Like the Torchwood Among Us range, right, that's ongoing at the minute, has been something that has just enthralled me this last month or so, because I know that not all of the episodes are beautiful, but it's my first introduction to Torchwood, and I've had such a good time listening to them and the themes of them, and this Torchwood team that I've just been plonked into has been, quite fun. But for me, I'd love to be in a unit box set or something like that. I think would be fun, because there's so much going on in Unit. To be part of that legacy, I think would be very, very cool.
Sure.
So, as you were talking about sort of working in Big Finish, and you talked earlier about being in a booth with Christopher Eccleston. Because I listen to a lot of the behind the scenes stuff when I finish an episode, I've sort of picked up bits. Like, it's almost like I've picked up a jigsaw of what happens during a day at Big Finish. But I have to. Are you in the same room as him, or is there separate booths and you can hear each other, or does it vary depending on where you are?
It depends on which recording studio, like, because where it was, there were several different like rooms you could go in. But the one we were in, there was a room that could accommodate. How many was it now? I think it was 3 people in like the main space, and then there was like a little like booth within a booth for a 4th mic. But yeah, when we recorded it, like, so it was almost like, say Chris was stood here, then I was stood next to him, then Harky was stood next to me or whatever. So yeah, we were all in the same room, which kind of helps, because yes, you are reading from a script in audio, like you're sight reading it as you go. But certain lines, if you see them coming up and you already know what you want to do, you have moments where you can like glance at the actor you're talking to or whatever. Because I always think that helps. It helps you you really get in touch with each other's emotions and what each character's doing. You respond to each other well. But yeah, mostly in the same room.
Because that's very important between your character and Doyle, played by Harky, because it means that you have to really nail that dynamic, don't you, between the two of you? And if that didn't work, then you'd ruin your characters, wouldn't you? You'd ruin the episode in that respect if it wasn't believable. And I don't believe you've met until you did those episodes.
No, yeah, the first one, that was the first time I met Harky, and I think it helps. We're both originally Yorkshire lads, me from Donny, him more like Leeds way, so we bonded over that, and it was something Chris, like, again, playful banter, would say, "Oh, right, you surround me with Yorkshire people," because he's obviously Lancashire, so, and we say, "Oh, we outnumber you, mate, 2-1," but again, but that's it, we all had this very friendly banter, like, that we could do this sort of stuff, and Chris he's so funny. Like, he comes out with all these like little jokes and stuff, and it's just, it's a, because I think people sometimes misinterpret Chris as being like this ultra serious human being, and he has it like any of us. He has his moments, but he's generally a very relaxed, very chilled out, very fun guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, especially as an actor. That's great when you work, and if you feel like you might be recording serious roles or whatever, but if you're having fun doing it, then I think it just makes the whole thing so much more alive.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed that Chris has been very matter of fact. When it comes to Big Finish, and when he was talking about why he's taking on the role, it was, he says, because it was work, and that was the important thing. And I think the difference between him saying that is that, and in sort of like a dishonest, like, fans, I'm just sort of betraying them kind of thing, is that he may not understand some of the stuff that we get, but he respects it, where these lines of dialogue that mean nothing to him are treated with such care that they work so well.
Yes, yeah.
Go on.
Go on.
It's all right. I was going to ask something else, so please.
No, you go for it. You go for it.
I was going to say that when you work within Big Finish for the day, because you only have a day to do an episode,
that's right.
So you are looking at a 60-minute runtime. I don't know how long is the day roughly.
It depends. Like, I mean, for Red Darkness, we all pretty much finished around the same time. I think that was one we mainly recorded fairly linear from start to finish. So I think we started at about 10 in the morning, and I think we were done by about 4 o'clock. So 6 hours. But bear in mind, you've got 45 minutes to an hour for lunch. But yeah, so 5 to 6 hours it took, and I think it was pretty much the same on. It was the same on The Green Gift, although I think Chris finished before we did, because for that one, since everyone was in the studio, they were like, right, Chris and Louise, you've got a lot of scenes together. We'll do that now. And then, Adam and Harky, you can come in and do your scenes. So it really depends on, I guess, the story and what scenes are where. But it's all well planned out. And again, I think that all the Big Finish guys have gotten so used to, recording a story in a day that even if things like change on a dime, they can just be like, cool, that's fine. We'll do that instead.
Yeah.
So yeah, very efficient way of working that I appreciated.
There's also sort of like the time constraints adds an element of sort of risk to it. I think that there was a box set, I think it was the new Unit box set, in the behind the scenes they're talking about how an actor couldn't make it to the recording day, and then the hour before they started recording they had to organise a new performer and then juggle around studios and technicians and things like that in order to do it. And I find that, I mean, Big Finish, because it's almost like this enclosed space where you've got 6 hours to record an audio together. And because you talked in the behind the scenes about how you kind of formed that bond really quickly. Would you say that you were ever stressful while filming the episodes, or was it a nice sort of breezy test? Because in the actual recordings, the behind the scenes stuff, there's definitely that element of you're under pressure, but you never seem like you're too crazy to have a chat, with Christopher Eccleston or vice versa.
Yeah, no, I think, as I say, when we got working, I don't think there was any stress at all, because I think also when you, even though I'm a fan, I was like, you're here as an actor as well. Like, I've got a job to do and I'm going to do my job, because, I never said to Chris, I thought about it, but I've never said to him the 2 times I worked with him, I could have easily said, I just want to say, like, I'm a huge fan. You're one of the main reasons I got into acting, blah, blah, because I felt I didn't need to. That's not what I was there for. If I'd met him at a convention, maybe, but do you know what I mean? I was like,
I totally understand that.
Yeah,
I'm here to do a job. If I was in your shoes, I'd do the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I'm here to do a job and I'm gonna do it. And I think because I led with that mindset, that's why I wasn't stressed. I quickly put out that admirate. I still admired him, obviously, but I put out that being my driving thought. It stopped being, oh my God, it's Christopher Eccleston. It's like, oh, it's cool, it's Christopher Eccleston. Now we're going to record this story together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was very stress-free. Same again when we did the second one. But I think being an actor naturally, or having done it for years, that helps. I think you get over your starstruckness very quickly, especially if you're doing an acting job. Even at conventions, though, when you first go up to the table, you're like, oh my God, it's so-and-so. But I've always found it when I've gone to cons, I'll have that 2 seconds of like, oh my God, and then it just becomes very casual for me. It's right, I talk to them like they're my mate, it's like, oh yeah, because you're another actor, you're another person. Not people who are like, oh my God, the whole time. There's nothing wrong with that. I get it. Like it's mad meeting like your idol or someone you look up to. But I guess, for me, I've always just found it very easy to sort of have the starstruck moment and then just like be super chill.
I slur my words quite a lot when I get nervous and sort of just I either talk so much about rubbish. It's like the first thought that comes into my head has been a case many times where I'm just sort of, maybe not even when I'm nervous, I just talk for no reason. But because I'm sort of slow, that's always sort of my worst nightmare that I'll do it. So I totally understand why you didn't decide to tell him. Did it sort of come out towards the end? Because in the behind the scenes, it was mentioned that when you were talking to I forgot his name. Can you remind me the actor? Harky, thank you. Yeah. Harky. You were talking to Harky how that you were actually a really big fan of Doctor Who, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't quite know that." You haven't told Chris, have you? Did it come out in the end, or was it always kept under wraps? But I think it probably would have been for the best, wouldn't it?
Well, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I know, between me and Chris directly, I never told him.
Right, yeah.
Whether or not maybe like Helen or David, the producer, whether or not they told him, I don't know. But no, as I say, in my view, it's not that, maybe I'm all about trying to be in the moment as possible. If maybe when we were having lunch and if I really felt a compulsion out of nowhere, then yeah, I'd say it. Yeah. But I just didn't feel that way. It was a thought that I thought, no, I don't need to do this. I'm very happy just like doing the work and like enjoying their company, their banter, etc. So yeah.
Yeah. With those kind of things, I think you can overthink them. I think If you overthink them,
Yeah. Oh
you
gosh,
might,
yeah.
that would be the thing that would make me nervous about doing it. And that's when it was announced, because you kind of put yourself in your shoes almost, and you try and think, how would I react in your situation? And we were very complimenting to you, and how big that achievement was for you in order to be in Doctor Who, because it's what we all. Even though I'm not really an actor, I'm not fussed about being in the show itself or anything like that. To be involved in it is just one of those big dreams come true, isn't it? So
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. It's one off the bucket list. Absolute dream come true for sure.
yes. Well, I have to say thank you very much for talking to me this evening. I appreciate you coming for this long. I mean, we have spoken a long time, I have to say.
We have, but again, I don't think there's an issue. If the conversation's
Yeah.
flowing and it's all good, then let it run. But no, thank you very much for having me, Dan. Honestly, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but it's been a pleasure to get back into it. And thank you for hosting and fostering a lovely environment to speak in.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. I'm slowly losing my voice. That's very kind of you to say.
So am I, don't worry.
Yeah, I wish you all the best. I have to ask though, any more Doctor Who going in the future?
This time, I'm honestly 100% no word of a lie. No word of a lie. I've got nothing on the agenda at the moment, but I still stand what I said earlier. If anyone from Big Finish, whether that's playing Callan or any other character, if they offered me, provided I was available, I would absolutely do it in a heartbeat. But no, at the minute, at the time we're recording this, nothing's on the slate. But I remain hopeful that maybe one day something will come up in the future.
Lovely. Have you? I don't want to just talk about your Big Finish things, because there's much more about you than just Big Finish. Is there any other roles or even YouTube items that are on the way in the future that you may talk about?
Ooh, trying to wrap my brains now. In terms of acting roles, not at the minute. I'm currently trying to find work for Christmas, which is always the lauded time for actors. I mean, doing a pantomime would be good fun, like a traditional British panto. That's always struck me as a fun one. So I've applied for a lot of those. YouTube wise, I'm just sort of, again, I don't have any major things planned at the minute. I'm just sort of, I know I'm on the main channel, I'm doing a lot of like the unscripted stuff, which again I like doing, and it's easy to do in the sense that when you get the spark, it's immediate then, and they don't take as long to make. But documentary wise, I've got a few ideas. I'd like to do a documentary about how colour television emerged in like different nations as opposed to the UK. One I might do one about is how Germany went to colour, because there's quite a fascinating story behind that. Because obviously at the time it was split as West Germany and East Germany due to the Berlin Wall. So I think there's a story to tell there. But again, not putting any dates on it. I've written... How far have I got with that one? I've written the script, and did I record the audio? I think I've recorded the audio.
You're asking me.
I know. Yeah, I think I've written the script definitely, and I think I've recorded the audio. So I just need to edit all the pieces together. But yeah, so that might come in the future. That'll be a fun one. But as to when, who knows? Could be next week. Could be next year. I don't know. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, so like I say, thank you very much for coming on. Your links will be down in the description if you want to go and check Adam out. I'm sure you can find his Big Finish episodes on there as well. Just go into the Ninth Doctor Adventures, Series 4, Episode 4, Box Set 4, and Series 3, Box Set 1, if you want to check them out. My links are also down there if you want to check out the podcast on any other platforms. We do commentaries. We're planning to do a few more quiz game-like items in the future as well. Hopefully some more interviews, and hopefully Will can join me next time. He's absolutely gutted that he could not. I've just seen a message from him.
Oh, bless him. No worries.
But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you did enjoy this video. Goodbye.